Hey guys, this is What If Deku was Spider-Man 2099 Part 1. Now, I feel like my last what if Deku, what if Spider-Man Miles Morales was in My Hero Academia? I feel like I stuttered too much. I did too many pauses, and also I didn't know what I was talking about. Since I said something, or about to say something, and I stuttered and fixed my wording. Now, I'm gonna try to do better. And I'm basically going to be switching up and be trying to re-recording, looking over my recordings and cutting out certain parts and basically making I'm doing it again. Dang. I can't talk to it. I can't. I have to dive back into my mojo. I'm losing it. But basically, I'm going to be jumping headfirst into making better quality what is for you guys. Better sound plays for the music in the background, and better plot devices, better mood and changes in the music to get you guys more immersed into my videos and immerse myself into my videos, because I honestly, my newer what I've been making, I don't enjoy listening to them at all. I don't like, even with people that don't really like how their voice sound, it's a different level, because I just hate hearing myself stutter. I just hate it. I hate it. But basically, enough talking. You guys just want to watch the video. I know you guys came here for the what if. About 40 of you came, because honestly, my views, they're absolutely garbaggio. At this point, I should just quit YouTube. But honestly, I love doing this. I love making videos for you guys, and I love recording and getting my thoughts out on how this fanfiction would, happen, how it would change the course of the story. And yeah, now it was multiple different concepts, maybe saying a My Hero Academia universe where the My Hero Academia cast was born in the year 2099 or something like that. But I'm going to start off with this certain type of story plot that is probably the most safest to go with. But let's just dive right into this fanfiction. What if Deku was Spider-Man 2099? Let's dive right into it. Now, I start our story off with Deku's birth, his conception. Now, Deku's appearance will change. Deku will have brown, blackish hair. And also, Deku would have a Spanish and Japanese lineage, as Deku's father would have been Spanish or Puerto Rican, and also his mother would have been Japanese. As we start our story off in Japan, as we see a man named Asashi, and let's just say he has some sort of Hispanic, Puerto Rican last name, third name. Just for the plot reason, to make Deku more like Miguel O'Harris, I'm just going to be making his father pretty much Latino, Hispanic, something along those lines to make him a little bit more like Miguel O'Harris. Now, we see that, Deku was born a couple years after Asashi. For narrating purposes, his name isn't Asashi, but still, I'm just going to be calling him that because that's Deku's canon's father's name. So, we're just going to be diving right into it. So, basically, he moves to Japan as a world-renowned scientist, actually. As he meets up with Inko, Inko, as he's doing his debut, his science, and also meeting up and gathering with different scientists in that range of Japan. Him broadening his science and also his experience with biogenetics, science, and also the idea of time travel. As we see that, he eventually goes on dates with Inko, and eventually the years go by as they eventually get married, and they eventually have Deku. About the same canon time Deku was originally born in canon. As Deku's born and grown up in a very profound household, and everybody knows his father. His father has made millions of thousands of support items for big incoming heroes. His science having a big influence on characters like All Might, Endeavor, Carmel Woods, and a new hero in this world that's named Giganta. And also another hero / villain. This villain or hero wouldn't be very known, but would be in this world. And also, disclaimer, a lot of Spider-Man 2099 characters and also villains will exist in this world and in this canon, and will be a big impact on the villain society in this what if and in this fan fiction of My Hero Academia. As we see that Deku's father continues to make a big influence and impact on the My Hero Academia universe. As we see that Deku's father is there for him, but majority of the time, not there for small things like raising him, teaching him life lessons, and also being a father. But him being there in the fact that he's providing money, he's giving Deku certain skills that every man or every young boy should have from their father, like not to get a girl pregnant at 15 or 10 years old, or 10 years old is probably, if you get a girl pregnant at 10 years old, you most likely got raped. But basically, it's simple. It's a lot of influence Deku's father had on Deku. As he raises Deku, teaches him a little bit of Spanish, and also teaches him a lot of his science and his technique. As in Inko in this world, she is actually a pretty well-known writer, and also has made a lot of published books, and is a very big named publisher. To basically put it simple, Miguel, aka Deku, for narrating purposes, Deku's real name would be Miguel Hataro Asashi. Miguel Hataro Asashi. Basically, him having some last names from Inko's part of their family, and also having the first name of his father's father, his grandfather, Miguel. So he would be Miguel O'Harris Asashi. That's his full name, Miguel O'Harris Asashi. As we see that Deku, for narrative purposes, I'm going to be calling him Deku, because every time I change Deku's name, I just say either his real name, Deku, Izuku, or I think that's it. I think that's only real names I call Deku, or Izuku. But we see that Deku basically is very smart, a very straight up a scientist, or like a straight up whiz when it comes to science, math, biology, chemistry, and a very, very into, genetic modifications. Now, in this world, in this universe, the My Hero Academia universe, the advancements of science and medicine and technology would be way higher in this world. Holograms, see-through phones, flying cars would actually be the norm in this world's 20-something year. So in this year, this time frame, this canon, this universe, this world's technology would be through the roof, would be more as if more and more advanced than the My Hero Academia technology. And even their technology is advanced for people that have quirks in the world. So their technology is way more advanced in this world. Not being 2099 type advanced, but still having somewhat of flying cars that can hover above the floor. And also having holograms, face scanning doors, and all sorts of other things. And also hologram and holographic arm wristbands, kind of like, Fitbits that you can call people on. So basically stuff like that, or smartwatches. So Deku would grow up being a very big household that was a lot of money, but him not being a spoiled brat, he would have been a little bit of a spoiled brat. Now we see that, Deku mainly focuses more on genetic modifications, and finds a liking to an old hero back in the early golden age of quirks, aka there's a hero, Spider-Man. He was a vigilante that no one knew the name of, and that was probably one of the best heroes to ever live. Took down incredibly big villains, like a old big-time villain called Dr. Octopus, and some other side 1 mil, about lasted a month type villain that was called the Spot, with some sort of uncanny teleportation quirk. As Deku would look way more into the Spider-Man lore. Spider-Man's history in this world as one of the Golden Age heroes and vigilantes that worked the best. And even at this point, would have been a better hero than All Might, with the amount of skill he had. Now, Deku would look more and more into it, being infatuated with the idea of trying to recreate a quirk. In this world, No one, and this is the biggest scientific draw that any scientist has ever tried to make a synthetic quirk, a fake quirk. A quirk you can give to somebody that's quirkless. Now, in this world, I forgot to mention, Deku is quirkless, but it never really hurt him since he was homeschooled by his father, and by the time he was 16, he was put in the private school to get social skills. As he went to school, basically coming across other not other heroes, but other pretty much well-known characters we all know from My Hero Academia lore. Todoroki, Ida, and a couple others. As he would go to this private school and become somewhat acquaintances with Todoroki. Not knowing him personally, but knowing of him and giving slight glances to each other in the hallway. Like a nod, or a handshake of some sorts, or something like that to acknowledge each other. As he would be more closer with characters like Ida, and also characters like some other side characters that were pretty calm and collected friends of his. But Miguel, majority of the time, Deku, majority of the time, kept to himself, focusing on trying to do the impossible of genetic modifications that the scientists or the science committee or science community could never achieve in this world, to make a synthetic, man-made quirk, as this would be a game changer to people that were quirkless around the world, but it would be a big problem. Imagine somebody that already had about 2 quirks, kind of like Todoroki's powers. Imagine them with a third, a fourth, a fifth different quirk. It would be preposterous, and even it would destroy people's bodies, because people's bodies weren't made to have quirks that weren't born with them. But it's simple, it would be horrible, because some scientists in the past, a project that was made a couple years ago in the early days of quirks called Project X, Program X, as it would mainly focus on trying to give people enhancements to their quirks, or giving normal people quirks in itself. And in this world, quirks would be around longer than an original time. So about like 50, 60, 70, 100 years plus of quirks. So about right near the end of medieval times, quirks would have started to appear in the world. And then majority of the time, those next like 20, 30 years of quirks being in the world, majority of only 10% of the population had quirks back then. Or about 5. So it would mainly be more or less people would treat them like mutants in the Marvel Universe, or mainly treat them somewhat as switches and myth creatures, and basically village against them and treat them like monsters. Because majority of people that have mutation quirks would be treated like monsters and be feared and disgusted by society. But that would eventually change when the rest of the population started to emitting quirks all around the world, and would eventually become the norm. And even at that point, to a point where if you did have a quirk, you would be considered a freak. It was opposite to what it was in the past. Now, Deku would have used all of his time, and eventually the time of art training would have came, to fruition. As he said, Deku would have gone to Deku Beach, basically clearing his head, writing his journal, and eventually coming to his lab, as he would have worked a majority, about 2 months in his lab for the beginning of the 10-month art training, to try to figure out how to bypass the biggest issue with making a man-made quirk, was how he could make it so it could be compatible with anybody, no matter what their DNA code is, no matter what code they carry. If their parents had a quirk and they were born quirkless, because you would carry that same DNA your parents had, giving your children a slight chance of having a quirk. As we see that Deku works and works and works and works, and eventually bypasses this and tests it out on himself without testing it out first on somebody else, since there was no real way to know if it would work by just using it on DNA samples. It had to be a physical human test. As he tested it out himself, as he was about to do it, as out of nowhere it would be gunshots and screaming in the hallway, as some sort of no-named villain would have barged into Alchemex. Alchemex being a building near this area that, well, Deku's father worked at, and that Deku's lab, or pretty much intern lab, was at. As someone would have barged in there and started shooting at the place, barging into Deku's laboratory, and basically him shooting at Deku as Deku was turned on the machine. As Deku would have been blasted against the wall, basically the machine blowing up, and the toxin, the synthetic quirk, being blown everywhere on top of Deku, and being, well, imploding the whole entire laboratory and the whole half of the building. As we switch about a month later. A month would have passed as Deku would have woken up in the hospital, his eyes being covered up by bandages, his skin being covered up by bandages, and his lights in his hospital bed and his room would be turned off, it being completely dim and completely and desolately quiet and cold in there. Deku would have gotten up, ripping the bandages off of his skin, seeing that it was healed. About a minute before Deku passed out, he saw his skin was charred to death. He looked like freaking Deadpool. As we see that Deku would have woken up, him having longer hair, his canine teeth being taller and sharper, basically having fangs, to put it simple. Him also having red, bloodshot eyes, and him being very sensitive to light, as he would have quivered in the literal floor, turned off the bathroom light when he would have turned it on to look at himself in the mirror. As he would have turned it on and dimmed it down, basically looking at his eyes as they would have been bloodshot, with his orifices being red. As he also would have looked at his body and see that he would have six-pack, him being taller and also stronger, and also having a more Spider-Man build. As he would have looked at his phone, as he would have seen that he was out and sleeping for weeks, months. As he would have looked at his hands, him having claws, and him also looking at his fingers, seeing some sort of suction cup type hairs that would have been very, very, very hard to see from first glance. As he would also notice that his powers are starting to manifest, as he would see quicker, he would react faster, his smell, his hearing, everything was on the sharp. He could hear, he could smell, he could sense everything. It was like a whole new aroma. That it was like experiencing the senses he had all his life for the very first time. Deku would have looked in the mirror one more time as he would have barged out his window, basically being shocked at what was going on with his body. As he would have crawled out his window, crawling to the wall, basically it being the middle of the night, as he would have been crawling on the side of the building, him manifesting the spider-like crawling. As he would have started to crawl more and more, as the idea of him or his quirk, his synthetic quirk, working, as he would have been happy. As he would eventually lose control, falling into a bunch of trash cans or dumpsters on the back of the building at the hospital. As he would have gotten up, basically running over into a nearby thrift store, taking off his hospital gown and putting on some raggedy old blue jumpsuit and finding some old red shoes, basically Deku's original red shoes in canon. As he would have walked out of the room, or walked out of the walking out of the store, walking down the alleyway, as he would have been walking down and walking down and walking down, eventually him seeing the news on some sort of TV on the side of the building, as it would have been news that, well, Asashi, the world-renowned scientist, would have been found a week ago from the day, dead in his laboratory, shot to death, and his room being charred to smithereens, the door being decayed off like some sort of quirk user burnt it off, and also us being shown that, well, we have some news that his son might pull through with his recovery of him being charred to almost death by the explosion that happened in his hospital that morning, or that day. As basically we see that, his laboratory that day. As we see that, Deku is shocked to hear this. His dad's dead. He immediately thinks about his mother and how she might be doing. As he walks over to his mother's house, seeing the door wide open and barged open, as he would have ran in there, as he would have seen his mother's dead corpse. As Deku would have looked around, trying to see who did this, as he would have seen bloody footsteps in the back of the balcony. As if he opened the window door, or opened the sliding door, as he would have seen a man in a black robe. As a man in the black robe would have looked back, saying, "Hello." Zuko. I've heard tales about you that it's been some rumors that some of my men have seen trying to quote unquote make a quirk. It seems like it worked. You have claws and your eyes are brighter red. And it seems like you have longer hair. It's only been a week. How's your hair growing so fast? As he looks over at Deku and says, it's surprising to see how much a boy could be moved to make something so evolutionary to science. But to put a simple boy, I don't like that. I can't have a child outdo my best scientist. We've been working on making an artificial quirk for decades, since the golden years. And if we can make a quirk, we can find out a way to take away a quirk. As Deku's confused and saying, what are you talking about? It is simple, son. And Deku would have replied with, I'm not your freaking son. As he would have gotten into a defensive position, balling up his hands, sorry. As Deku would have been looked down and stared down by this man, him saying, you're not my son. You're right. My son died to a quirk user, a villain. I want to take away all quirks so everybody would be equal. So I could have the power back then to kill that man that killed my son. That killed my wife too. You want to know one thing? You want to know the main reason why I wanted to erase quirks from society itself? It's not because I simply want to make the world equal. Yes, that's the biggest reason. But the simple fact is, I just want to see everybody suffer. The world burn. Imagine if All Might, or even Endeavor, or maybe even Hawks would have just lost their power one day. Be normal. Be quirkless. Be powerless. I would want to see them tremble. Want to see them quiver. I want to walk and beat the man Endeavor to a pulp. I want to beat him like a real man. No quirk, no power. Only me and him. You and me. Imagine how the world would be so much better if everybody was completely equal. Everybody. No powers, no quirk. Only hard work, boy. I enjoyed killing your mother. Deku would have gotten pissed as he would have ran towards this man, as the man would have charged right at him, punching him down in his face, pushing Deku down on the ground into a freaking mountain of rocks. A whole crater would have been underneath Deku. As Deku would have been getting up, coughing up blood, the man would have grabbed him saying, you're durable. A normal human would have combusted into a pile of blood and guts. You're pretty strong. As he would have chucked Deku in the sky, Deku falling in the front of the building, basically like a bloody mess, as his legs would have been cracked and his body would have been shattered inside and outside, as blood would have been pouring out of his body, as Deku would have been a bloody mess, Deadpool style. As for this reason, Deku would have increased self-healing, kind of like Spider-Man does. A Spider-Man can take a beating and get back up a couple days later, like how he can take punches from Kraven and characters like Shazam, and characters like Thanos and Hulk, and get back up. As the man would have left looking at Deku's body as he leaves. As we switch a month later, so police would have talked to Deku. They would have looked after his mother's death and would have looked into it, but not finding much about it. As we see that Deku over the years would have been depressed, would have been filled with rage, hatred, and carnage. As he would have hated everybody around him, he would have felt hurt, betrayed by the world. As how is it fair that his mother and his father are both dead, and all of his grandparents passed away a long time ago? Deku has inherited, or is going to inherit, a crap ton of money. But that money is never going to fill the hole his parents' death left in him, that was engraved in his body. And the day he was destroyed and brought down to his knees, even though he had a quirk or some version of a power, he was worthless now. As Deku healed in those following months, being as powerful as he was when he first got his quirk, as he started to train. He started to train and exhibit and use all his powers to the fullest, and started to exhibit and learn about his newfound powers. As he had differences from the original Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man did have a spider sense or some sort of secondary sense that he did talk about in some of his interviews online. As he had some sort of secondary sense that was like a buzzing. But Deku didn't have that. Deku had more of extra senses that gave him a illusion or a mimicry of that power. Because if you don't know, Miguel O'Hara doesn't actually have a spider sense. Deku would have trained, and he would have trained, and he would have trained, exhibiting all his newfound powers and abilities and speed and stats and durability, as he would have been able to crawl on walls, claws, and also poisonous fangs. Also, he would have been incredibly fast and athletic and very mobile, as he also had increased senses like smell, hearing, and multiple other things, as Deku could also see in the dark as well. Deku had a bunch of other powers. His poisonous fangs could be poisonous if he put enough pressure into them, but also he can paralyze foes with his fangs. They're more like spider fangs. Also, for example, his claws are retractable, as I think I said earlier. And he also has claws on his toes. He noticed a couple days prior to his whole, a couple hours prior to when he showed up to his house. As we see that Deku trains and becomes faster, stronger, and even starts to learn about not keto, but jitsu, karate, and all sorts of martial arts, boxing as well, kickboxing, and everything of the sorts. Learning about 5 to 6 different martial arts and fighting styles, as he also made about 2 to 3 of his own specific ones that are mainly focused on different versions or different combos of his powers. Deku's strength and speed was also to a very big amount of strength and speed and limits. He has some limits to his abilities. He was very sensitive to light. So to put it simple, his mask that he designed was supposed to dim down the light or his sensitivity to light, so he could be outside in public, so he wouldn't be always in the nighttime fighting crime, being a type of eraserhead type of isolationist, or basically stay away from other people. But Deku did become very different, basically the same personality as Miguel O'Hara's, very dark and basically Batman type of brooding. As we see that Miguel or Deku continues to go through training, eventually finding some inspiration for his uniform or his hero costume, as he wanted to become a hero, so the police wouldn't be on his back, since he didn't want to look for that. He didn't want police all over him, so to put it simple, he didn't want to do that. So he wanted to be a licensed hero, so he can go after his villains and the people that did him wrong, as his main objective was to get revenge. For what they did to him. As we see that Deku switches or has a flashback, the last and very last talk he had with his father. His father would have told him that it's so many things we could do to help people. So many things we can do to change the world, but we need to stay strong, son. I want to tell you this, and one thing you should always keep with you, no matter what happens to me, your mother, or anybody. You should always learn this one lesson. As we get switched out of that flashback, as we see that, Deku was woken up while he was on pretty much a drive from his butler to entrance exam UA. As Deku walks in there, having a black jumpsuit on with Aquamech's logo on the back, as his father is nearly one of the top head scientists there, and even one of the board council members there. So he basically, simple, his inheritance is going to be like half Alchemech's, since the legal troubles that happen and all other stuff. So there's a lot of, Alchemech's big time, pretty much employees or competitors. But as Deku was walking down to the entrance exams, as he would have been stopped in his tracks by a shadowed figure. But I'm gonna leave it off here, guys. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And as always, guys, have a blessed day. Deuces.